Harry, welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast, brother. It's a massive honor to have you on the show.
Man, thank you so much for having me on. I've seen some of your guests, it's some big names, and I'm like, damn, I don't know if I deserve this, but I'll take it.
Mate, forget about the Olympics. The hype is here. You got to live up to this one now. Mate, obviously, speaking of the Olympics, huge effort, bronze medal, first time in 33 years, I believe, that an Aussie has taken home a medal in boxing from the Olympics, which is just incredible. Before we touch on that whole experience and the mental and physical prep that went into competing in Tokyo, I'd love to rewind the clock a little bit, mate, and get you to fill us in a bit with your journey to how you even got to the position to be heading over to Tokyo to compete for Australia. So where did the whole boxing journey start? And then more specifically, what was the actual process to get the selection to head over to Tokyo?
Yeah, so my boxing career has been like up and down throughout my whole life. I started when I was 9, a young kid that has 2 older brothers and the youngest of 3 boys. And I always explain my brothers were out the back digging holes with dad, and I was inside dusting with my mum. Like, always gravitated toward my mum and what she was doing, and I never really got respect from my brothers or dad. And I think I watched too many Rocky films, mate, because I wanted to start boxing, and I went into the boxing gym and fell in love with the sport almost instantly. And out of my first 18 fights, I had my first fight when I was 12, and out of my first 18 fights, I lost 10. So I had a fair bit of failure early on, and I actually failed to make the Olympics on 5 different occasions too. So
On how many?
It's been a long. On 5 different occasions, I failed to make the Olympics. Yeah, so it's been a long journey.
In terms of the sorry to cut you off. In terms of with the amateurs, like, this is something I'm a bit intrigued by as well. Obviously, you see in like the pro ranks in boxing, it kind of gets played out. Like you see the guys that are the up and coming prospects almost get handed their first kind of almost 10 fights on a platter with guys that are nowhere at their level to really bump up the record. Does it matter as much in the amateurs what your record is? Like you mentioned, your first 10, you lost 10 fights in your first 18 or whatever it was. Does that matter when it comes to amateurs in terms of what opportunities you can potentially get down the track?
Nah, it doesn't matter at all, man. That's the best thing about it is, and you can honestly, as long as you have like balls, like you can fight anyone. You can try and fight anyone in the amateurs, you know what I mean? And like the guy who I fought at the Olympics, the Cuban, Andy Cruz, he's had 118 fights internationally. I think he's only lost 100. He's only lost about eight fights. So he's an exceptional athlete. But it really doesn't matter, man. Over 3 rounds, like, you're not going to get outclassed that much. And I've always had the philosophy, like, I'll fight anyone. Even in the pros, I hope I still have that philosophy. I don't want to like get to 15 fights and have a cushioned record and 15-0. I've knocked every guy out in the first 4 rounds. The taxi drivers. I don't want that. I want to like challenge myself, man. Yeah. And I think it's going to be hard coming from an amateur background where it's like we actually do try and fight the best as much as possible.
Yeah. To then almost take a step back and jump in the ring with guys that you're clearly better than.
Yeah, and as well, like your family are paying to come and watch you, right? This is what I don't understand. Your family are paying decent money, $150 sometimes for a ticket, and you're not going to go over in 3 rounds. You know what I mean? The guy's useless at boxing, and it's like, man, I don't know if I could actually, morally, I don't know if I could actually make my family pay for that stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, isn't it? Like, you've touched on how you're in there trying to face the best guys you possibly can. So, even myself coming from a sporting background, it's that old mentality of like sometimes you kind of match the opposition in terms of the quality you're playing against. I remember even like back in basketball, like you'd play like a shit team and all of a sudden you play like absolute dog shit because the standard, like your standard kind of mirrors who you're playing against. So as a boxer, I would imagine it'd be similar, like coming into the ring, fighting a guy that that you can take out in the first round. Like mentally, it's got to be hard to actually physically G yourself up as much for that fight and stay as focused as what you probably should be. And I guess that's probably where it gets almost dangerous, like getting clipped in a fight where you think that it's going to be a walk in the park and all of a sudden it's lights out.
Yeah, you think about like stories like Buster Douglas beating Mike Tyson. I think he was 42-1 the odds or something like that. Like, and he beat Mike Tyson. He was not expected to do that. And you always hear stories like that. You come in underprepared when you're expected to win a fight. And I always just want to challenge myself, man, whether it be in boxing, but I always just want to challenge myself. And I actually want to fight people who are better than me. Even having like a conversation, I want someone who's going to challenge me and make me think that I'm wrong. I want someone to prove me wrong. You know? So then I'm constantly thinking, growing and changing my thoughts. You're not just stuck in the same pattern. Like,
Yeah.
I want to be challenging myself all the
Never
time.
want to, never want to be the smartest person in the room or the most experienced person in the room.
No way.
Just going back to the journey to Tokyo. So you mentioned it was 5 times where it didn't work out, didn't go in your favor. Leading up to Tokyo, obviously it got pushed back a full 12 months anyway. But what was the process to the selection to the Olympics this time around?
So yeah, you have to start off by winning your state title and then winning your national title, and then you get 2 chances internationally to make the Olympics. So we go through Asia now, which is a lot harder. We used to only go through Oceania, and there's only really New Zealand and maybe a Pacific Island country that enters in each weight. So it's a lot harder now to make the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms, because we have to go through Asia, we generate better fighters, I think. So I think it's a good thing. But I failed. I had 2 chances to make it in Asia in March last year, and I missed out on both. And I actually got my my spot given to me because of my ranking. So the last qualifier got cancelled due to COVID.
Yep.
And I was lucky, man. It wasn't the way I wanted to qualify, but I got given the spot based on my ranking because my ranking was pretty high. So
Interesting.
As I mentioned, it wasn't the way. I'm an honest athlete, man. I want to earn my spot. I don't want to get it given to me. And it was definitely in the back of my mind, like, if I don't perform at these Olympics, like, I'm always going to have in the back of my mind, I didn't deserve to be there.
Yeah. Well, mate, I think you clearly proved that you deserve to be there. Taking home the bronze, which is an incredible achievement. Going into Tokyo, what was the prep like, both physically and mentally? I mean, it goes without saying, mentally, for absolutely everyone who's tuned in, regardless of whether they're an athlete or not, it's been difficult the last kind of 18 months to stay focused. A lot, anxiety and stress is up for a lot of people, and there's a lot of unknown. So as an athlete, what was that like mentally? And then physically, did the lockdowns and stuff really throw you out with your prep in the lead up?
Of course, man. Like, naturally, there was periods where I was like, I hated it. But I think anyone in a high performance environment, like, we often look at things as opportunities, or we're looking for the silver lining. Like, we're constantly looking, how can we make this more in our favor, this situation? And like, last year sucked, man, 100%. I was stuck in Melbourne for 90% of the lockdown, but I look back now, man, I spent so much good time with my family, stuff that I haven't done in years because I constantly travel for sport. I worked with my brother a lot, which was great. Rebuilt the relationship there. And it was almost like I was forced to take a break from boxing. So then I had to think about my life outside of boxing.
It's almost like a forced audit, wasn't it, for everyone to your whole life? Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously it sucked, man. Don't get me wrong. I would much prefer to be competing, but like I'm grateful it happened, man. Like, I learned a lot and had to learn to be a little bit more resilient. Because often I think in Australia, man, we've never really had any serious problems. And like, we'll force under last year, obviously, and of course it's still continuing this year. But like, it's made us a lot more resilient. You have to think about your life more, think about things you're grateful for.
Yeah.
And sort of simplify life a little bit more, which is good.
When did you actually find out that you were heading over? Obviously, you said that it came down to the ranking. Like, how far in advance was that prior to the Olympics that you found out?
Yeah, so I was actually on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. Victoria went into a little lockdown. I think it was February this year.
Okay.
And there was a 5-day lockdown, and I was like, I couldn't risk being locked down again. So I drove straight to the border. I drove through the night.
Yeah.
And I found out when I was by myself, man, with no one. And I found out by myself in a small town called Eden, on the border. And I found out, and I just dropped to the ground and I started crying, mate. And it was a pretty special moment, but also, as well, as I mentioned before, the question in my head, like, did I deserve this?
Because of the fact that that was when you found out, and it wasn't immediately after competition, how long was it before? So how long between fights, like that first round of the Olympics, how long before then had you had an actual, officiated fight?
That's a great question, man. So I last fought in March 2020, and then my next fight was in July 2021, end of July as well.
Isn't that mental? Like, you think about like preparation for the Olympics, and obviously you've got, let's say, a track and field athlete. They may be in a similar boat, haven't actually competed, but they're doing what they're going to be doing at the Olympics as often as they like. But with the boxing, you can spar as much as you want, but it's completely different. That's so crazy how even though you're putting in obviously everything you can mentally and physically to preparation, the main fucking ingredient of preparation has been missing for over 12 months.
Yeah, and the reality is, mate, like, no disrespect to Australian boxing, like, there's a big ceiling in Australian boxing. Like, people overseas, the best amateur boxers in the world, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, a lot of Europe, you know, they're really good at boxing, and they were competing, man. They were like competing and often, like, you know, so throughout that time.
Yeah.
So we're already behind the eight ball as it is. And yeah, but like, it is what it is, man. We had like a really good prep. We managed to go to America and Japan early, where we got a lot of comp spars and mixed with some of the best in the world. So I'm grateful that we had that opportunity as a team.
So you headed over to the States before Tokyo?
Yeah.
Cool.
So we're in Colorado, high altitude training with the USA team.
You mentioned right at the start of the conversation how you probably maybe watched a few too many Rocky movies, which I'm sure all of us probably have. Is there anyone now that you still, obviously you're at the level where you're competitive with pretty much anyone you step in the ring with, but is there people that you still look up to in the boxing world that you do, you know, aspire to follow in their path or even kind of take bits and pieces from the way they fight?
100%, man. Like, my favorite fighter is Vasily Lomachenko.
Oh, man, I promise you, I was like, no fucking word of a lie. I was genuinely about to say, I'm like, surely you're a fan of Lomachenko.
I've actually got him tattooed on my leg, mate.
That's crazy.
But yeah, like, and even as well, the guy who I fought in the semi-final, Andy Cruz, like it's crazy to think, mate. I've idolized him for a long time. He's been 2-time world champion in the amateurs, an exceptional athlete, and to share the ring with him, man. Like, of course, I wanted to try and beat him, but like there was like a bit of like respect. And
yeah.
Like I'm fighting one of my idols. Yeah. So it's pretty crazy.
Fight until your idols become your rivals, hey?
Exactly right.
That's amazing, bro. Well, I want to quickly touch on something that came up on social media. I chucked up on my story the other day that we're going to have a chat, and a bunch of boxing fans jumped in with some questions. And one of them that came up a couple of times was the format of the amateur boxing. So is it the same across the board in any amateur competition? So is it the 3-minute rounds? Is it the 16-ounce gloves always? And also, like, is that something that you're a fan of, or would you prefer it to be more rounds, lighter gloves? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So first of all, up until 64 kilos, we wear 10-ounce. And then above 64, they wear 12s. And it's 3 rounds across the board. So I actually think it's really hard to determine a winner over 3 rounds. Like, especially at that level, there's usually similar ability. So I think the semi-final and final should be 5 rounds.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
It will never change, I don't think, based on my opinion. But I do think you'll be able to at least judge a fight a little bit better over 5 rounds, especially at that like semi-final and final. But yeah, that's how all how boxing runs. It's 3 rounds, 3x3. You lose, you're out. So you could draw the best guy first up. You could draw the worst guy. It's just out of your hands. And it's the most exciting thing about it. You have to train for everyone.
I think that's one thing that I was a big fan of. Like, I would personally love to see him a bit longer. But the exciting thing I found was the fact that you watch a lot of the pro fights now, and the first sometimes 4 to 5 rounds of feeling out rounds in your 10 to 12 round fights, and it's like, fuck, but this is just a bit of fucking nothing time to start off. But the fact that round 1 you're going to come out firing, and that round counts for everything makes it a lot more exciting to watch, I found.
Yeah, and with
in terms of really seeing the skills of the boxer, and you don't have that round where you can just fuck around and feel the other guy out.
100%. And with the scoring system now, it's not the point system, so it's very similar to professionals. The winner gets a 10, the loser might get a 9 or an 8 round. So it's like with the old scoring system, it was points. So you could be down 12 points, but you could make that up in the next round.
Yeah.
If you lose the first round now, like, it's pretty hard to win the fight in a sense. You can't really come back and bust your ass. You have to make sure you win straight away the first round, and then of course it sets you up for the fight.
On that, with the scoring, how, like, I struggle to wrap my head around how that works and what the purpose of that whole 10, like that scoring system is. So, like you said, if you've won a round, you're going to get 10s. How do they then decide whether your opponent or you gets, say, a 9 or 8? Can it go all the way down to to 1s, or if you just get absolutely fucking slammed in the round, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the usually it's 9. But then if you get completely outclassed, it's
Yeah.
8, no less than 8, unless you get a point taken off you.
Okay.
So yeah, no less than 8. Very rarely do you see it. Sometimes you see it. But yeah, like in saying that, actually at the Olympics, there was a few 10-8 rounds. You're like, oh, that was questionable. But
Yeah.
sometimes someone's just outclassing someone. And it's just like you're not even on the same level. So it's a 10-8.
Did you were a fan? Well, obviously you didn't really have a choice, but how did you find it with no crowds compared to whether there had been like a packed out stadium every time you stepped into the ring? Would you prefer it to be similar vibes to a sparring session in training where there's no one around and you can kind of just go to work, or would you prefer a big crowd with the energy?
A crowd can either make or break you, man. So I think me personally, I thrive off situations like that. So I would have enjoyed it. But
Yep.
also because I had so long out the ring, I was almost grateful that there was no crowds.
Okay.
Because it didn't throw me off. There was no emotion. It was just like, it almost just felt like a sparring session.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think if I was fighting regularly, I would have loved to a crowd to have been there.
At the weight category that you fought at, is that something that you can naturally sit at pretty comfortably, or did you have to really bust your ass prior to competition to make weight and then stay at weight throughout the games?
Yeah, so I used to fight at 60. I won the Commonwealth Games at 60. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm at 63 and I feel a lot better at 63, but I have as well bulked up over the last 3 years and
Yep.
I've done a lot more weight training and I'm focusing on and sitting around 68, 69 naturally and
Mm-hmm.
then cutting down
Right.
the closer we get to comp. But I was making it good throughout the tournament. As the tournament went on, like I was making weight for about 12, 13 days.
Yeah.
Sitting around 63, 64, and it was just like I was starting to feel it towards the end for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's another factor I didn't really even think about too much throughout it. It's to have to stay at that weight throughout the whole time. It's pretty full on.
Yeah, it definitely makes it tough, man. And as well, having that time out of the ring, like my body was just getting a little bit more fatigued, a little bit more often. I was having less energy
A lot harder to recover.
Yeah, of
Were
course.
you in between matches? Were you taking it easy? Were you training? Were you able to, like, what was the process like in between match? Because I reckon, correct me if I'm wrong, but early stages it was like a few days between fights, wasn't it?
Yeah, mate. Between the first and second was 5 days off. And it was
Yeah.
almost like you was doing the first fight again when you get in the. I'm like, oh my god, but is what it is. I was grateful I could like after my first one because first fight's usually the hardest for everyone. Every combat athlete says that. So it's like at least then knew I could hydrate and eat whatever I wanted,
Yeah.
knowing the second fight was a long way away.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into the first fight feeling really good, really hydrated. I didn't have to worry about making weight again for a while. So
Yeah.
I was grateful for that for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned the word grateful just then. From the outside in, it seems like mindfulness plays a big role in your prep for your fights and just in general as a person. Is that something that's always been the case, or did you pick that up along the way? And if you did pick it up along the way, like semi recently, what was the who did you kind of get that from, or was it someone that you saw, a book you read, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I think naturally I've always been like a fairly optimistic person. I constantly think like, bloody hell, I'm fucking grateful to live in Australia. Like from traveling the world, I went to Bali with the family early on and Thailand as well. And I've traveled around the world to a lot of third world countries through boxing and like seeing how some people live, it really just like brings you back down to earth and, forever grateful to live in the place of Australia. But probably the mindfulness and gratefulness that come from the Resilience Project. It's pretty popular book. I listened
Yeah,
to that probably.
we've had Hugh on the show.
Hey,
Hugh's a good friend. Have you met Hugh in person?
no, but I've spoken to him online. He seems like an absolute legend.
Yeah, that's a tee up. I'll tee up an intro with you guys.
Yeah,
Previously saying I was thinking, fuck you guys, you'd have such a good conversation. But yeah, it's a
yeah,
brilliant book.
of course, absolutely. And like, I think as well, as I said, just like I'm very optimistic and I honestly believe naturally, of course, we're hardwired to think about the negative. But I think about it, man, 99% of my life is so positive, like
Yeah.
so positive. And like, I know there is that 1% and we often think about that 1% a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It takes up a lot of our energy, but like I constantly just try and bring myself back. Like, man, there's so much to live for. There's so much going on in my life that is positive that
Yeah.
I've created for myself. You know what I mean? I show up every day. There's obviously a team around me as well that support me and lift me up. but like I showed up and I've created this, and I'm just grateful for that, man.
Is there a certain amount of practices that you follow each day? You know, on the show, I talk a shitload about my morning routines and things about tools I've added into the toolkit along the way with the mindfulness side of things, whether it be the meditation, the journaling, and even things like cold showers and stuff like that. Is there a set routine you like to follow day in, day out to set you up for a successful day?
Of course, man. So in the morning, I like to wake up and say a few things in the mirror. They often change, but consistent ones is I'm enough, I'm worthy of love, because I felt one of my biggest motivations was I never felt enough. And it's like, when I achieve that thing, I will be enough. It's all external, and
Yeah.
like you're,
Yeah.
you're never going to find happiness
I'll be
externally.
happy when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, I just want to, like, I want to feel happy right now and in my skin. And I'm trying to teach myself that I am enough and I am worthy. As well, I meditate daily. The waking up app I find really useful, as well as doing like my own silent meditations as well. So they vary in times depending on what my my day looks like. And as well, journaling at the end of the day, for yeah, just writing my thoughts down, of
Yeah.
course, things that I'm grateful for as well. But yeah, I find that stuff so valuable, man. Like, I'm so curious about myself
Yeah.
and so curious about the world. Like, I constantly just finding out new things and like changing my thought patterns and growing and trying to grow.
Yeah, I love that, mate. I'll shoot through a message after this with a few different books and audiobooks that I reckon you'll get a lot out of. Sounds like we are interested in some pretty similar things, which is awesome.
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Have you
Yeah.
ever listened to The Relentless by Tim Grover?
Yeah, I've listened to Relentless, and I'm just listening to his new one, Winning, at the
Winning,
moment.
yeah, same. I'm like 3 or 4 chapters in, man. I love that because it made me, when I was younger, I often felt like I felt a lot of these things when I was younger. And there was a time when I was about 17 to 20 where I was being probably a bit rude at times to my family and close knit circle about like, no, I don't care if you guys are supporting me or not. I'm doing this, like really stern.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like they took it the wrong way because they didn't understand the mindset. So I
Yep.
shied away from it for a bit, but then this book is just like saying, mate, you don't need to shy away from who you are. Like, that's
Yeah.
part of who I am.
Yeah.
I fucking love that book.
It's awesome. I mean, especially with Winning, I love the insights into, even from the outside in, when he talks about guys like Kobe and MJ. Like, you look at both of those guys and you think there's so many similarities, but even when he goes into detail about how different they were, like their whole mindset, and one working harder instead of smarter, and yeah, it's very intriguing. But I'll send through a list of a bunch of other ones, which I'm sure you've got all the time in the world at the moment to listen to plenty of those.
Thanks, man.
Mate, in terms of the physical prep, you mentioned before you got into a bit more strength training and stuff like that. Previously, like leading up to the Olympics, let's say at the absolute peak of training camp leading into Tokyo, what did a typical week look like in terms of how many times you're sparring, hitting the pads, maybe running, strength work, all that type of stuff?
Yes, obviously it varies where you are in the preparation, but an average week would look like 3 sessions a day, cardio in the morning, and then usually like a nap after between the first and second. The second session will either be a weight session or a conditioning session, whether it be a conditioning weight circuit,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And then of course boxing in the afternoon, and that would vary between sparring 2-3 times a week, like proper hard sparring, to also as well combat condition schooled sparring. So yeah, it's a lot of training, man, like for only boxing 9 minutes, but it's all part of like making sure your body is fully prepared for the moment.
With this sparring, do you do more than 3 rounds, or are you only ever sparring at the same distance as the fight?
Man, when we got to America, high altitude training as well, so less oxygen.
Yeah.
So it was already really tough. The first day of sparring, literally the second day we were there, the Americans threw us in and we did 8 4-minute rounds. Man, I was fucked. I was getting shit punched out of me. By about the third round, I'm gassed.
Yeah.
And I'm just getting the shit punched out of me from round 4 to 8.
What's the plan for you, man? Like, moving forward, is it to keep on the same path and take that gold medal at the next Olympics? Do you have any intentions of going pro? What does that look like for you?
It's interesting, man. Like I'm 24. It's a great age to turn pro, but I think now the rules have changed and we can do both. So if we can fight amateur, go to your Commonwealth Games and Olympics, but also building our profile up in the pro ranks, I'll try and do both. If not, I'll probably
When you
turn pro.
say that building up profile in the pro ranks, what do you mean by that?
So like it's a business, man.
Yeah.
Like that's why I really like amateurs, because it's like it's more of a sport.
Hmm.
You're actually fighting people who are more on the same level. A lot of the time in the pros, as you mentioned before, like you're fighting people who you should knock over. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and it's like you're cushioning your record to make it look like you're really good, and
Hmm.
then you get a shot potentially overseas. But like I think you got to build your brand up. Hopefully, present really well. It
Hmm.
is a business. You got to market yourself, and then hopefully you can get more money, because you can't eat medals and you can't eat trophies. You got to think about food as well, putting food on the table.
Yeah, 100%. How, in terms of the, say if you were to go pro, do you think it'd be difficult to make that transition early on to, as we've touched, or would you continue to fight the same way and go out in that first round and try and get the job done as soon as possible? Or would it be, and I'm sure you've got the experience already with sparring so often and whatnot, but would it be hard to make that transition knowing that instead of a 3 minute round fight, you might potentially be fighting 10, 12 rounds? With
So
2 ounce gloves.
yeah, it's a good question, man, because like obviously I've been an amateur for so long now, but I grew up with a coach who is 79 years old, veteran of the sport, and he's more of a pro coach. So when I was younger, man, I was boxing 10, 12 rounds most nights in the gym. They weren't real hard rounds, but I was still boxing those distances. And I've always been an endurance athlete. I love my long distance running, love full hard cardio sessions. So I think because of that, the pros will suit me. I'll have to change a few things. They're almost like two different sports.
Yeah.
One's a lot more fast paced. The pros is a little bit more slow, slowing it down. But I think my fitness, I'll be able to maintain a really good work rate in the pros for a long distance as well. So I think I'll be okay. I'm not a strong puncher. I'll probably need to sit down on my punches a little bit more, get a little bit more respect in the pros.
And stay in that same, like around the same weight division, or?
It's interesting, man. I don't know if I'd make 61 and a half. I could make it 100%, but I don't know if I could just sustain,
Yeah.
a career at 61 and a half. So I think I'd probably go 63 and a half for sure.
Outside of the ring and outside of boxing altogether, what's something that you like to do that's completely unrelated to sport, or not necessarily unrelated to sport, but the sport of boxing?
Good question, man. It takes up a lot of my time, but something that like the media have jumped on for ages. I do something once a month that makes me uncomfortable. I've been doing that for like 2.5 years. Done
Awesome.
some really cool stuff, like had some really hard conversations. Probably the hardest thing for a male with like dad or
Yep.
ex partners. Did 48 hours no talking. I fucking love talking, as you can probably tell by this podcast. Started ballet, public reading. That was a really hard one. Done numerous other challenges. And I've learned new things from each challenge, and I hope I can continue making ideas for my future, because it really helps me grow as a person, and then in tail, it helps me grow as an athlete too.
That's awesome. And was that just off your own initiative, just knowing that they all, like, good things happen outside the comfort zone, and just wanting to really open up broaden the horizons, I guess, of what you can potentially do?
Yeah, so numerous people have helped me get to that mindset. So the Reach Foundation, a foundation that's really close to my heart. They help young people, teenagers in Melbourne, Victoria, and New South Wales. And yeah, they've supported me since I was about 17, and helped me form into the person I am now. And as well, the Gold Medal Ready program, which was an initiative started by the Australian Institute of Sport, started with the Commando Regiment and Gold Medal alumni. And it was just preparing us for the Olympics. And they taught me pretty much like you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable to grow.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. I mean, that was one of the main reasons why I started doing the cold showers every morning. Straight out of
I'm the
bed,
same as
straight
you,
into the
man.
cold shower, man.
Yeah.
It's
I haven't had a warm shower for about 3 months now. Yeah, it's been a long time. So
it's such a good thing. And, I often say to people, like, people often ask me like what the benefits are. And, I mean, there are multiple physical benefits, but for me, it's like that building up the momentum of the discipline of knowing that especially in Melbourne winter, the last thing you want to do is go and jump in a cold shower at fucking 4:30, 5 o'clock. But just the rest of the shit throughout the day becomes easy. Like, it's easy to do the stuff you need to do,
yeah,
which is awesome.
it's good as well when you make like a commitment to yourself,
Yeah.
because like the reality is, man, you can't lie to yourself. Like you can fake and be like have a persona
Yeah.
that the people believe,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't, behind closed doors. You cannot look yourself in the mirror and lie to yourself. You know what I mean? That's why
Yeah.
I try my best to push myself through my preparation, because I love that feeling. Commonwealth Games, I felt it, and the Olympic Games, I felt it. I could look myself in the mirror and go, on, I've done everything I possibly could.
Yeah.
I couldn't not look myself in the mirror and be proud of myself already before the games even started.
Yeah, and it's a lot harder then to be disappointed in yourself, even if the result doesn't go your way, compared to the disappointment that you feel when you know you haven't done the work, you know you haven't put in everything. Do you find that just before we wrap things up, man, want to be respectful of your time? Do you find that now with a lot more, especially at the moment, a lot more public attention on you and your achievements at the Olympics and probably your profile growing and growing by the day almost? Do you find it do you feel like any extra pressure at the moment to continue to do what you just said, to really be yourself and to make sure that you're staying true to the Harry that is the real
Yeah,
Harry?
yeah, it's interesting, man. No one can really prepare you for stuff like this. You know what I mean? And I think I'm just trying my hardest to be myself and try and be really authentic. And because I think if you don't, it's gonna come out eventually.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not going to be your true authentic self. So I'm just trying my best, man, to enjoy the ride. And the reality is I'm just a little boy from Little Victoria, and I love my mates and I love boxing with all my heart. And I would quite happily do that, without any fame, any recognition. I do it purely because I love it. And I hope people can see that I'm just a normal kid and I just love boxing. Simple as that.
Man, you've achieved incredible things already, and I'm sure it's going to take you a very long way, and hopefully see you on that top step of the podium, man, with the gold medal.
Let's go.
That's incredible, bro. Mate, appreciate your time. And yeah, it's been a really enjoyable chat, and I'm sure everyone who's tuned in has taken away a lot of value as well. So really appreciate it, bro.
Man, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Guys, everyone who's tuned into today's episode, we'd love for you to take a screenshot and post up on your Instagram story for us. Tag myself, tag Harry. I'll have the links to his socials in the show notes below. We'd love to hear your feedback. Get around a great man. Enjoy the rest of quarantine, man. And everyone who's tuned in, thanks so much for listening.
Yo.